standoff. But the fact of the matter that a thing like this can happen in an international airport in the presence of arriving passengers, some of them who are diplomats, puts us in the category of a banana republic. I think Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto should be ashamed of themselves to allow such illegal orders to be carried out by armed police officers in an international airport. And this will not be the end of the matter. But the way Miguna has been whisked away.
Right. Still here discussing the issue of Miguna Miguna. Remember, the latest court order coming in with respect to his case is that from Lady Justice Roslyn Aburili, who has ordered his immediate release from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and directed that he appears in court tomorrow. Nelson Havi, his lawyer, still with me, Oliver Kipchumba. Nelson, let me begin with you with the why this is so important. For some who are tempted to say, well, this is about one man, why continue the focus? Why have the live coverage that we did yesterday? Even today, media was barred from covering this at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Let's talk about the bigger picture, Javi. Why does this matter to everyone? Why should it?
It must always matter to everyone. Reason being, the rights that are being denied to Miguna Miguna are rights that are due to him as a human being. In law, we say they are inalienable. You cannot derogate on these rights. So to the extent, therefore, that Miguna is entitled to re-enter and exit Kenya at will, there can be no justification on the part of the government in putting conditions. But let's look at the condition they are putting. They're saying that they want Miguna to apply for a Kenyan visa. No Kenyan has ever applied for a visa to remain in Kenya. And look, Miguna is a former state officer. He was a permanent secretary. He's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. He's a prominent politician here. The moment you categorize him as a Canadian required to apply for a visa in Kenya, then you curtail his rights as a Kenyan. He cannot participate as a politician in Kenya. If he was to call a rally tomorrow in Uhuru Park, Matiang'i will comfortably say that there is a foreigner here engaging in political activities. And it is for that reason, therefore, that this thing cannot be seen as individualistic. What happens to the Miguna is happening to many people who were not able to know of their predicament. The more reason as to why the Ministry of Interior must be put to account once and for all, so that this problem is not repeated on any other Kenyan any other day to come.
Oliver Kipchumba still with me here. Oliver, there's a question here from our viewers on Twitter. Ben Keraro says, is lawyer Oliver Kipchumba saying that citizenship is secondary to documentation?
No, it's not. And citizenship, when you get citizenship by birth, it is not subject to any other thing. But when it comes to documentation, you must be properly documented for you to travel, for purposes of travel, not for purpose of any other citizen. And this only applies to somebody in the case of Miguna Miguna, not to any other case. Let's say, for example, somebody who goes to Uganda and comes back. The same does not apply to them. This is a peculiar situation in itself. So therefore, we cannot state that citizenship ranks secondary to documentation, because initially we were Kenyans even before documentation was in place. And the Constitution tells us that anybody who was in this country when this Constitution was passed and has been born here is a Kenyan.
So what next in your view?
I think, Yvonne, the first point we must be very categorical is that this is the height of moral bankruptcy we can sink as a nation when in terms of enjoyment of rights. Rights, when it comes to enjoying rights, they are they are not enjoyed individually. Rights are enjoyed broadly, but when it comes to responsibilities, they accrue to individuals. The right to human dignity and the inherent right to be a Kenyan citizen, a born Kenyan citizen, accrues to Miguna. He was not given by the Constitution, but he has it inherently because he's a born Kenyan. And therefore, I think the excesses we saw yesterday from the police was uncalled for. This is just one person. We did not need to go to the extent of using excessive force. And I think the government is still in a position that it can contain Miguna Miguna. Secondly, the state agencies named before in this issue should just obey the court orders as put in place. We have around 7 orders.
Yeah.
And one of it now is the habeas corpus application that will be argued tomorrow. And I think the best thing, and in the interest of every Kenyan, court orders must be obeyed.
Yeah.
And we cannot have a state whereby we do a buffet way of court orders. We choose which one to oblige to and which one to neglect. I think we must be a state governed by rule of law.
All right, thank you. Oliver Kipchumba, we thank you for your time on the show this evening. Your views continue. Ndungu Gashane says, is Miguna Miguna a Kenyan? If not, who allowed him to vie for the Nairobi gubernatorial race? There's more of your feedback that's coming in. Please remember to use the hashtag #TheBigStory because that's how I'm tracking your feedback. Suba Churchill, who was caught up in traffic and not able to be with us here, but joins me on phone now. Suba, your thoughts as to the developments up until this point, despite the fact that there is yet another court order to have him released, that is not the case at this moment?
Yes, I think everything has gone wrong with the Miguna's case right from when he was arrested. You remember the manner in which police invaded his residence in Runda, the manner in which they broke into his house and destroyed everything, the manner in which he was, instead of being brought to court in Nairobi, he was taken to somewhere in Lari and later Githunguri, the manner in which the government exposed him to villagers in Githunguri, attacking him in a police station, the manner in which he was taken to Kajiado and charged. You all remember how Justice Mwongo, issued orders which government ignored, and blatantly so with a lot of impunity. Time when government indicated that Miguna was within the precincts of Kilimani Law Court, Miguna was apparently being deported to Canada. All this at a time when Kenya has given unto itself a new constitution of dispensation, a constitutional framework that guarantees rights of individuals and collectives, rights that government has an obligation to respect, and a constitution that establishes checks and balances between the 3 arms of government. And that's why we have the judiciary to ensure that the executive does not go beyond its boundaries in terms of executing the law. And so the Miguna's predicament cannot be based on the happenings yesterday. Whatever transpired yesterday was completely unconstitutional, was completely illegal. It was completely unnecessary that government brings the kind of contingent of General Service Unit police officers to harass people in international airports. International airports are part of the government's international relations point, and I think it has given the government and Kenya as a country a bad name that it had the audacity to mobilize such reinforcement of police officers that descended on police, on journalists and everybody else.
Suba, the question then is, what next? What options are available for Miguna Miguna? Are you confident that this is the 7th order that we're getting from the courts, that will be obeyed? And, so what happens tomorrow, for example, if he is not presented in court? What then?
I think government has suffered enough embarrassment. It has embarrassed the country. It has embarrassed all Kenyans as a government that does not respect the rule of law. It has no option but to produce Miguna before the court of law as has been directed. The order of habeas corpus is one of those rights that an individual has a right to, and the government is obligated to produce the body, because the meaning of habeas corpus is produce him dead or alive before the court of law.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that Miguna managed to resist being deported to Dubai without the necessary travel documents gives him an opportunity to be produced in court, because it is an obvious fact, and everybody knows that Miguna is within the precincts of this country, within the precincts of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. So I think government has an obligation, if it does not want the public to get in and go and get Miguna to the court, I think it has every obligation to make sure that it respects those court orders tomorrow.
Okay, my final question to you, if you can speak to this in just a minute, is why should I care? Why should any other Kenyan care? Because many people will say this is one person. The media is making a fuss over nothing. Civil society is making a fuss over nothing. Indeed, the Ministry of Interior said we shouldn't even be reporting there because, they talk about the airport being a security installation. Why should every Kenyan who's watching our show this evening care about what is happening to Miguna?
I mean, right, you see, they say injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And the fact that it is happening to Miguna today means that it can happen to any Kenyan. The fact that it is being executed with such unprecedented impunity is what has alarmed people. It did not start yesterday. I've taken you through the journey of when Miguna was first arrested in February, when he was taken to police stations that are outside the jurisdiction where the alleged offense is supposed to have been committed, when he was presented before a court in Kajiado, quite some miles away from the city where he lives and where the alleged swearing in is supposed to have taken place. You all know that the swearing in of the people's president happened here to Uhuru Park. The place where Miguna should have been held, if at all, was Central Police Station. And so Kenyans are just concerned that government should arraign its forces against one individual. And that's why Miguna's case, even though it's an individual, is way in excess of what government should do to enforce the law, if at all they are still enforcing the law. And that is why even the media must focus on that, because the media itself became a victim. Yesterday, when we saw journalists being beaten, we saw KTN's own reporter being harassed, being pushed by an overzealous police officer, whom I believe should also be brought to justice, because they went overboard in trying to just contain that one person. So if people want to say that Miguna is just an individual, then why did the government bring over 50 GSU police officers? Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is already manned enough by sufficient number of undercover and uniform police officers. There was no point at all to bring the enforcement they brought. There was no point to embarrass the country before international guests and dignitaries. And that is why we are saying Miguna's case must be used as the final one beyond which government must not go and which government must never get away with in terms of ensuring that justice is obtained for him. Because he is a Kenyan, he has a Kenyan identity card, the manner in which he was deprived his passport was criminal, was illegal, and the court said as much, and we want those rights corrected, because injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Indeed, a good way to end our conversation with you and to end the show tonight. Suba Churchill, thanks very much for joining us on phone. He's from the Rights Protection Center. My thanks as well to Oliver Kipchumba and Nelson Havi, who's Dr. Miguna Miguna's part of his legal team. Tomorrow is another day. We will see what happens within the corridors